The chains bit into Serenity's wrists as she stood before the high court of the Autumn Realm, magic-dampening iron burning against skin that had never known such cruelty. 300 Fey nobles filled the gilded hall, their whispers rising like a swarm of poisoned bees. At the center of it all, High Lord Giovanni sat upon his throne of living oak, his silver eyes fixed on her with an expression she couldn't read. "The accused will speak her bloodline," the High Magistrate commanded, her voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. Lady Osmanthus had presided over the Autumn Court for 5 centuries, and her face held all the warmth of winter frost. Serenity's throat closed. She had served in Giovanni's household for 3 years, invisible among dozens of servants who tended the palace grounds. She had expected to live and die in obscurity, a half-blood unworthy of notice. She had never expected this. "I said speak, girl. Or shall we assume your silence confirms what Lady Isolde has accused you of?" From the left side of the hall, a woman with hair like spun copper smiled. Lady Isolde, Giovanni's former intended, had the kind of beauty that could start wars. She also had a talent for destroying lives with perfectly placed words. "Forgive me, High Magistrate," Isolde said, her voice dripping false concern. "I take no pleasure in this accusation. But when I discovered that this servant girl has been using forbidden glamour magic to disguise her true form, that she is, in fact, mortal-born with no Fey blood at all, I knew I had to bring her before the court. The laws are clear. Mortals are forbidden within the palace walls." The whispers exploded into outraged murmurs. Serenity's hands trembled. It wasn't true. Her mother had been Fey, she was certain of it. The memories were hazy, fragmentary. Her mother's otherworldly beauty, the way flowers bloomed in her footsteps, the lullabies that made starlight dance. But her mother had died when Serenity was 5, and her mortal father had told her nothing before his own death 10 years later. "Remove the iron!" Giovanni's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Every head turned toward him. He hadn't moved from his throne, but something in his tone made even Lady Osmanthus hesitate. "High Lord, the protocols for suspected mortals require—" "I said remove it!" 2 guards stepped forward and unlocked the chains. The moment the iron fell away, Serenity gasped as her magic returned. Not the weak trickle she'd always known, but a flood that made her skin glow with golden light. The guard stumbled backward. Someone in the crowd screamed. "Impossible," Isolde breathed, her perfect composure cracking. Lady Osmanthus raised one hand, and the golden light flickering around Serenity's body suddenly condensed into visible form, a bloodline mark that burned itself into the air above her head. The ancient rune blazed with power that made the windows rattle in their frames. The High Magistrate's face went white. The mark of the Dawn Court, the royal bloodline we believed extinct for 800 years. Serenity couldn't breathe. The magical symbol hovering above her head showed a sun rising over twin peaks, wreathed in flames that never consumed. She had seen that mark before, in dreams that felt more like memories, in the fragmentary visions that sometimes came when she touched ancient stones in the palace garden. "This is a trick," Isolde hissed. "She's using forbidden magic to forge a bloodline mark. Everyone knows the Dawn Court fell during the Shadow War. There are no survivors." "The mark of the Dawn Court cannot be forged," Lady Osmanthus said, though her voice shook. "The ancient magic will not answer to false claims. If this girl bears that mark, then she carries the blood of the lost royal line." Giovanni rose from his throne, descending the 7 steps with fluid grace. He moved like a predator, all coiled power and lethal beauty. His silver eyes never left Serenity's face as he crossed the marble floor. The crowd parted for him. Even Isolde took an involuntary step back. He stopped 3 paces away, close enough that Serenity could see the faint scars that marked his jaw, evidence of battles fought in the endless wars between the courts. Close enough that she could smell cedar and night-blooming flowers. "Look at me," he commanded. She forced herself to meet his gaze. His eyes were the color of moonlight on steel, ancient and unreadable. She had seen him dozens of times during her years of service, had learned to make herself invisible when he passed through the gardens or the corridors. She had never been this close, had never felt the full weight of his attention fixed solely on her. "How long have you known what you are?" "I didn't know, High Lord. I swear it. My mother died when I was a child." "My father told me she was Fae, but he never spoke of bloodlines or courts. I thought I was just..." Her voice broke. "I thought I was just a half-blood. Barely worth noticing." Something flickered across his face, too quick to name. "Who was your mother?" "Aurelia. She never used another name. Just Aurelia." The murmurs that rippled through the crowd were different now. Shocked, reverent, afraid. Lady Osmanthus swayed, gripping the edge of her podium. Aurelia Dawnfire was the crown princess of the Dawn Court. She vanished the night the Shadow Court attacked when the king and queen were slaughtered. We assumed she had been killed as well, her body lost in the massacre. But if she lived... "Then her daughter is the rightful queen of the Dawn Court," Giovanni finished. His voice carried across the hall, iron-hard and absolute. "And under the ancient treaties, an insult to royal. Blood is an insult to all the courts." He turned, pinning Isolde with a look that could have frozen fire. "You accused a queen of being mortal. You attempted to have her executed for the crime of existing. What punishment does our law demand for such treason, Lady Osmanthus?" The High Magistrate's voice shook. "Exile to the mortal realm. Stripping of all titles and magic. Permanent banishment." Isolde's beautiful face contorted with rage and terror. "No, Giovanni, please. I didn't know. How could I have known? She was just a servant. She was a queen living in hiding, and you tried to destroy her out of petty jealousy." He looked at the guards. "Take Lady Isolde to the border gates. She has until dawn to cross into the mortal realm. If she's still within our lands when the sun rises, execute her." 2 guards seized Isolde's arms. She screamed, her voice rising to a shriek as they dragged her toward the doors. "This isn't over! The Dawn Court is dead! She has no throne! No power! She's nothing!" The doors slammed shut, cutting off her cries. Silence fell across the hall, broken only by the crackling of torches and Serenity's ragged breathing. The bloodline mark above her head had faded, but she could still feel its power humming through her veins. Magic she had never learned to access, never learned to control. Giovanni turned back to her, and this time she saw calculation in his eyes. Not warmth, not affection, just cold assessment. The Dawn Court's territory was absorbed by the other realms after the massacre. By law, those lands revert to you. He paused. But you have no army, no allies, no trained magic. Every court in the realm will see you as either a threat or an opportunity. They will try to control you or kill you before you can claim what's yours. The words hit like physical blows. Serenity's legs threatened to give out beneath her. "Then what do I do?" "You marry me." The hall erupted. Nobles shouted over one another, some in approval, others in outrage. Lady Osmanthus hammered her staff against the floor, calling for order. Serenity stared at him. "What?" "The Autumn Court is the most powerful of the 4 remaining realms. An alliance between us would protect you from those who would see you destroyed. It would give you the resources to rebuild your court, to reclaim your territory, and it would secure the peace treaty I've been negotiating for the past decade." It wasn't a romantic proposal. It was a political calculation delivered with all the emotion of a tax assessment. "I don't understand. You rejected every bride the other courts offered you. I heard the servants talking about it. You refused them all." His expression didn't change. "Because none of them brought anything of value to the alliance. You bring legitimacy to the dawn. Court's resurrection. You bring balance to the power structure that's been fracturing since your family's death. And you bring an end to the succession disputes that have been bleeding my court dry for 300 years. So I'm just useful." Yes. The honesty shouldn't have hurt, but it did. Serenity looked around the hall at the hundreds of Fey nobles watching her like she was a curiosity in a menagerie. She thought of Isolde's hatred, of the whispers that would follow her everywhere now. She thought of her mother, dead for 20 years, and wondered if Aurelia had lived in hiding because she was afraid, because the weight of being queen had been too much to bear. What if I refuse? Giovanni's eyes narrowed. Then you'll be dead within a month. The spring court will send assassins. The winter queen will offer you an alliance that's really slavery. The summer prince will wage a war to claim your territory before you can defend it. You have power, but you don't have time to learn how to use it. Marry me, and you get both protection and training. How generous. I'm not offering generosity. I'm offering survival. She wanted to refuse, wanted to throw his practical proposal back in his face and prove she could stand alone. But the mark burning beneath her skin whispered the truth. She was powerful, yes, but she was also ignorant. 3 years of scrubbing floors and tending gardens hadn't prepared her to rule a court or fight off rivals who'd been training in magic and warfare since birth. How long do I have to decide? Until the next full moon. 3 days. He turned toward the throne, then paused. You'll be given rooms in the eastern wing, royal chambers. Guards will be posted outside your door for your protection. Or to make sure I don't run. He glanced back at her, and for just a moment, something almost like amusement flickered in his silver eyes. If you run, you die. I assumed you were intelligent enough to understand that. Then he was gone, ascending back to his throne and dismissing the court with a wave of his hand. Nobles filed out in clusters, their whispers rising like storm winds. Serenity stood alone in the center of the hall until a servant, an older woman with kind eyes, approached and gently touched her arm. Come, my lady, I'll show you to your chambers. You'll want to rest after such an ordeal. Serenity let herself be led through corridors that looked different now that she walked them as a queen rather than a servant. The marble seemed to glow brighter. The tapestries showed stories she'd never noticed before. Ancient battles between courts, coronations and treaties, a history written in thread and gold. The eastern wing was reserved for royalty and honored guests. Her new chambers consisted of 5 rooms, a bedroom larger than the cottage where she'd lived with her father, a bathing room with a pool fed by hot springs, a sitting room with windows that overlooked the forest, a library and a private dining room. The servant helped her out of her simple dress and into a sleeping gown of silk that felt like water against her skin. Rest now, my lady. Tomorrow we'll see about proper clothing and meals fit for your station. When the door closed, Serenity sank onto the edge of the massive bed and let herself shake. The tears came slowly at first, then in great, wrenching sobs that tore at her chest. She cried for her mother, who had died protecting a secret. She cried for the simple life she'd lost the moment that bloodline mark appeared. She cried for the loneliness of being suddenly important when all she'd ever wanted was to be safe. She didn't know how long she wept before the knock came at her door. Yes? The door opened. Giovanni stood in the doorway, tall and imposing in his formal court attire. He looked at her, tear-stained face without expression. "May I enter?" She nodded, too exhausted to refuse. He crossed the room and sat in the chair opposite her bed, maintaining a careful distance. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. "The servants tell me you've been working in my household for 3 years." "Yes, High Lord." "And in all that time, I never noticed you." It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. "I made sure you wouldn't. Servants survive by being invisible." "Did you want to be invisible?" The question surprised her. She looked up at him, studying the sharp planes of his face, the way shadows gathered in the hollows beneath his cheekbones. "I wanted to be safe. After my father died, I had nothing. No home, no family, no prospects. Getting a position in your household was the best thing I could have hoped for. I never imagined." Her voice caught. "I never imagined any of this." "Your mother lived in hiding for 15 years. She gave up her throne, her power, everything she was born to, because she knew that being queen would make you a target." He leaned forward slightly. "I think she would have wanted you to survive, whatever that requires. Even if it means marrying someone who sees me as a political tool?" "Yes." She almost laughed. His honesty was brutal, but at least it was honest. "Why haven't you married before? The servants say you've refused dozens of offers." "Because every woman who was offered to me came with strings attached. Alliances that would have weakened my court. Treaties that would have cost more than they gained. I won't sacrifice my people's safety for the sake of tradition or political pressure." "But you'll marry me." "Because you're different. You need me, which means you won't try to manipulate or control me. And I need what you represent. The restoration of the Dawn Court, the balance that's been missing since the Shadow War." He stood, moving toward the door. "Think about my offer. You have 3 days to decide if you want to live as a queen or die as a martyr." He was halfway through the door when she spoke. "Do you believe in the fated bond?" He froze, turned back to her slowly. "Why do you ask?" "Because my mother used to tell me stories. She said that some fae are destined for each other, bound by magic older than the courts themselves. She said that when 2 souls are meant to be together, the magic recognizes it, makes it impossible for them to be separated." Giovanni's expression was unreadable. "Those are children's tales. Romance for those who can afford such fantasies." "But do you believe in them?" The silence stretched between them like a living thing. "I believe that survival matters more than destiny. That power is more reliable than fate, and that queens who wait for magical bonds to save them pretend to end up dead. He met her eyes. Good night, Serenity. The door closed behind him, leaving her alone with the weight of her new name. No longer the half-blood servant, but Serenity Dawnfire, last of the royal bloodline, queen of a murdered court. She lay back on the silk sheets and stared at the ceiling, where painted stars glowed with their own soft light. Somewhere in the palace, Giovanni was probably in his own chambers, already working through the political ramifications of their potential marriage. Somewhere beyond the palace walls, enemies were already planning how to destroy her before she could claim her power. And somewhere deep in her chest, beneath the fear and confusion and grief, something ancient stirred. A magic that had been sleeping for 20 years, waiting for this moment, waiting for her to become what she was always meant to be. She closed her eyes and let the magic rise, just a little, just enough to feel the power humming through the walls, the ancient spells that protected the palace, the ley lines that connected this place to every other seat of fey power in the realm. And beneath it all, she felt something else. A thread of magic that wasn't hers, wasn't part of the Dawn Court bloodline. It pulsed with the rhythm of a heartbeat, steady, strong, ancient. She followed it instinctively, letting her consciousness drift through the palace until she found the source. Giovanni sat in his private study, documents spread across his desk. But he wasn't reading them. His head was tilted back, eyes closed, and around his body glowed silver light that matched his eyes, the pure magic of the Autumn Court's ruling bloodline. And between them, visible only to magical sight, stretched a thread of gold and silver intertwined, a bond that predated their meeting, that had existed before they were born. The fated bond. The thing he claimed not to believe in. Serenity pulled her consciousness back, gasping as she returned fully to her body. Her hands shook as she pressed them against her chest, feeling the warmth where that gold and silver thread connected to her heart. He knew. He had to know. The bond was too strong, too obvious to miss. Which meant he was lying about not believing in destiny. And if he was lying about that, what else was he lying about? Sleep didn't come easily that night. When it finally claimed her, Serenity dreamed of her mother, Aurelia Dawnfire, beautiful and terrible, wreathed in flames that didn't burn. "You have his eyes," her mother said, smiling. "Silver and gold, dawn and dusk. I knew the moment I met your father that our daughter would bridge two worlds." Father was mortal. He had brown eyes. Aurelia's smile turned sad. "Your mortal father raised you with love, but he was not the one who gave you life. That gift came from the High Lord of Autumn, who loved me once, before duty and politics tore us apart." The dream shattered. Serenity woke with tears streaming down her face and her heart hammering against her ribs. Giovanni was her father. The realization hit like lightning. She remembered fragments now, her mother's whispered conversations with visitors who came in the night, the way Aurelia had described a silver-eyed lord who valued duty above all else, the reason they had lived in hiding in a small village at the edge of his territory. Her mother had been the High Lord's lover, had fled when she became pregnant because she knew that a child who carried both Dawn and Autumn bloodlines would be seen as too dangerous, too powerful, a threat to the careful balance between courts. Serenity pressed her hands over her mouth, stifling the sob that threatened to escape. Giovanni didn't know, couldn't know. If he'd known that Aurelia had borne his child, he never would have let them go, never would have allowed his heir. to grow up in poverty and obscurity. But he'd felt the bond, had to have felt it. The magic didn't lie about these things. Unless he thought the bond was political, just another manifestation of convenient destiny. She needed to tell him. The truth would change everything, would transform their arrangement from a political marriage into something else entirely. But the words stuck in her throat every time she imagined speaking them. Because what if he rejected her? What if the news of a half-blood daughter was too much? What if he decided the political complications outweighed the benefit of the alliance? 3 days passed in a blur. Servants brought her meals she barely touched. Tutors arrived to begin teaching her about Dawn Court history, about the magic she carried, about the political landscape she would have to navigate. Giovanni appeared twice, both times to discuss treaty terms and alliance structures, always keeping their conversations coldly professional. He never mentioned the bond, never acknowledged the magic that sang between them every time they were in the same room. On the evening of the 3rd day, he summoned her to his private chambers. The room was smaller than she expected, furnished simply with dark wood and deep green fabrics. Books lined the walls and a fire crackled in the hearth. He stood by the window, silhouetted against the sunset. "Have you made your decision?" Serenity's hands trembled. She clasped them behind her back. "I have." "And?" "I'll marry you, but I have conditions." He turned to face her, eyebrows raised slightly. "I want true partnership, not a puppet queen you can manipulate. I want access to all court decisions that affect the Dawn Court territories. I want trainers who will teach me combat magic, not just courtly arts. And I want honesty between us." She met his eyes. Always honesty. Something flickered across his face. Approval, perhaps, or surprise. "Those are reasonable terms. I accept them." He crossed the room toward her. "Is there anything else?" This was the moment. The moment to tell him the truth about who she really was, about the blood they shared. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, she heard herself say, "Why did you really reject all those other brides?" "I told you. They came with political complications I couldn't accept." "That's not the whole truth." He stopped a pace away from her, close enough that she could see the silver flecks in his eyes, the faint scars on his jaw. "No, it's not." The admission hung between them. "Then tell me the real reason." 300 years ago, I loved someone. She was brilliant and beautiful, and everything I thought I wanted in a queen. I was young enough to believe that love mattered more than duty. His voice went cold. "She betrayed me, sold intelligence to our enemies, nearly destroyed my court for the sake of power. I executed her myself." Serenity's breath caught. "Since then, I've refused every marriage offer because I learned that love makes you weak, that emotional attachment clouds judgment, that the only reliable foundation for a royal marriage is mutual benefit and clear-eyed assessment of what each person brings to the alliance." That's a lonely way to live. But it's safe. And safety is what matters when you're responsible for an entire realm. She understood then. He felt the bond between them, but he was fighting it, refusing to acknowledge it because acknowledging it meant vulnerability, meant risking the kind of pain he'd experienced 3 centuries ago. "What if I told you that destiny isn't a weakness? That the fated bond exists because some magic is older and wiser than our fears?" "I'd tell you that you're naive, that pretty stories about dust and love get people killed in the real world." "Then why haven't you broken the bond?" The words came out before she could stop them. His eyes widened fractionally, the first real crack in his perfect control. "What are you talking about?" The bond between us, gold and silver, dawn and dusk, I felt it the first night when I was learning to sense the magic in the palace. You felt it too. You had to have felt it. That's why you offered marriage instead of just a military alliance. That's why you're so determined to keep this cold and practical, because you're terrified of what it means. For a long moment, he simply stared at her. Then, slowly, he raised one hand. Silver light gathered around his fingers, and he pressed his palm to her chest, directly over her heart. The magic flared between them, gold and silver, autumn leaves and dawn light, twining together like vines seeking the sun. The bond blazed visible in the space between their bodies, impossible to deny. I've felt it since the moment you stood before the court, since the iron chains fell away and your power flared. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. I thought I was going mad. Thought it was some trick of proximity or politics. But the magic doesn't lie. It never lies. Then why are you fighting it? Because everyone I've ever loved has left, has died or betrayed me or been taken by enemies who knew that love was my weakness. I can't, his voice cracked. I can't survive that again. Not with you. Not when the bond makes it impossible to protect my heart. Serenity reached up and covered his hand with hers, holding his palm against her chest where he could feel her heartbeat. What if I told you that I'm not going anywhere? That destiny brought us together because we're meant to be stronger together than we could ever be alone. What if you're wrong? Then we'll face whatever comes the same way we'll face everything else, together, as partners, as equals. She took a shaky breath. I may be new to this world, but I know one thing for certain. The bond between us is real, and I'm choosing to trust it. He closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, they blazed with silver fire. If I accept this, if I let the bond complete, there's no going back. The magic will bind us for eternity. You'll be mine, and I'll be yours, in ways that transcend marriage or politics or anything we can control. Are you certain you want that? Her answer came without hesitation. Yes. The magic erupted between them like a supernova. Gold and silver light flooded the room, spiraling around their bodies and weaving together into patterns that had existed since the first dawn. Serenity felt the bond settle into place, not a chain, but a connection that ran soul deep. She could feel his, heartbeat matching hers, could sense his emotions as if they were her own, could see through his eyes the centuries of loneliness and loss that had shaped him into the cold, controlled ruler the world saw. And beneath it all, she felt his love, fierce and protective and utterly consuming. When the light faded, they stood in each other's arms, breathing hard. Giovanni's hand cupped her face, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. You're the Dawn Court's heir, the queen of a realm that's been dead for 8 centuries. And you're mine. He pressed his forehead against hers. Mine in ways that no treaty or marriage contract could ever make you. And you're mine. The High Lord who rejected every bride because he was waiting for the bond to show him his match. I didn't believe in the bond, didn't think such magic still existed. But you felt it anyway. I felt something. I told myself it was political convenience. You're terrible at lying to yourself. He pulled back just enough to look at her properly, And for the first time since she'd met him, she saw him smile. Really smile. Not the cold, diplomatic expression he showed the court, but something genuine and warm and devastating. Marry me tomorrow. Not because of politics or survival, but because the magic chose us, and I'm done fighting it. That's the worst proposal I've ever heard. It's the only proposal you've ever heard. Then I suppose I'll have to accept it. Someone needs to teach you how to be romantic. He kissed her then, and the magic flared gold and silver between them, sealing the bond in a way that needed no words. The wedding took place at dawn 3 days later, when the light was strongest and the veil between worlds grew thin. Every remaining court sent representatives. The Winter Queen with her ice-pale attendants, the Summer Prince with his guards of living flame, the Spring Lady with her entourage of flowering vines. Serenity wore a gown that seemed woven from sunlight itself, a gift from the palace's master tailors, who had worked through 3 nights to complete it. Her hair was crowned with a circlet of gold and amber that had belonged to her mother, recovered from the Dawn Court's treasury. Giovanni wore armor of silver and green, the formal regalia of the Autumn Court's ruling lord. He looked like something from a legend, ancient and powerful and impossibly beautiful. They spoke the old vows in the language of deep magic, words that predated the courts themselves. When the high priestess asked if they accepted the bond, they answered in unison, "By blood and magic, by dawn and dusk, by gold and silver, we accept." The magic that erupted from their joined hands sent shockwaves across the realm. Every fae in the 4 courts felt it, the resurrection of the Dawn Court, the completion of a bond that changed, the balance of power itself. When Giovanni kissed her, sealing the marriage, the sun broke over the horizon in a display of light that hadn't been seen since before the Shadow War. Golden rays pierced the clouds, and for a moment, everyone present could feel the touch of the Dawn Court's magic, warm and welcoming and impossibly alive. Lady Osmanthus stepped forward, her voice ringing across the assembled witnesses. "I present to you Queen Serenity Dawnfire, rightful ruler of the Dawn Court, and her consort, High Lord Giovanni of Autumn. May their reign bring peace to all the realms." The cheers that rose from the crowd were genuine. Even the rival courts recognized that this marriage might finally bring the stability that had been missing for 8 centuries. But not everyone was pleased. At the back of the crowd, a figure in a hooded cloak watched with eyes that burned like dying embers. Lady Mélisse, sister to the Shadow Court's king, had waited 800 years for her family's victory to be complete. She had worked in secret to keep the Dawn Court from rising again, had orchestrated Aurelia's death, had planted agents in every court, and now this slip of a girl threatened to undo everything. "Let her enjoy her wedding day," Mélisse whispered to herself. "She'll learn soon enough that queens who shine too brightly attract monsters from the dark." But Serenity didn't see the threat lurking in the shadows. She only felt the warmth of the sun on her face, the solid strength of Giovanni's hand in hers, and the bond between them that pulsed with gold and silver light. For the first time in her life, she wasn't invisible, wasn't powerless, wasn't alone. She was a queen, a wife, a woman who had found her match in the most unlikely of places. And as Giovanni turned to her with a smile that was hers alone, she knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The servant girl who had scrubbed floors and tended gardens was gone. In her place stood Serenity Dawnfire, queen of the resurrected Dawn Court, bonded to the High Lord of Autumn by magic older than memory itself. And her story, their story, was only just beginning. What do you think about the story? Let me know your comments. I would appreciate each of your thoughts. Also, comment which state you're watching from so I can give you a shout out on the next videos. Don't forget to subscribe so you can stay updated on our next uploads. Thanks for watching!